And now, participant, I would like to introduce Dr. Anne, Associate Professor of Management at the College of Business at Abu Dhabi University, and she will take you to the presentation of the first module regarding the leadership, vision, and mission in the Future Schools 2030. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Shireen, for that kind introduction. And thank you, Mr. Kennedy. If he's still here, I think he had to go to another meeting, but those were very inspirational words. I hope we can live up to them, really, and help you to get ready for all the changes that he indicated. So you are now here in the first module of the Future School Workshops 2030. And you will see that these are workshops. So we are going to take you on a journey where you have to participate yourselves. We will ask you to actively reflect on whatever topics we are presenting to you. And the order of the workshops has a logic in it as well. So today we're going to start with vision. And I'm going to take you even beyond vision. I'll explain that later. Then our next module will be in 2 days from now, and we will look at leadership. So we go from vision even further, we go to leadership, and next week there will be more emphasis on creating an innovative culture in education, in schools, but in education as a sector in general. Then after that, focusing more on the operational logistics of and techniques and tactics on how to get this all these online new technology firmly embedded in a curriculum that is resilient for the future. And the last week, led by Dr. Shireen, will focus on sharing best practices. But you will see that throughout this workshop, it's not just us talking like we're doing now. It will be heavily involving your expertise and your work experience, as we have now 264 participants and some more coming, perhaps some more joining later. So we must make use of that. And this is a unique opportunity that we have to combine your insights. So first of all, let me share my screen with you and start as quick as I can, because I was counting on 1.5 hours, but here we are, right? So here we are. Share. Okay. So you're now in module 1A. There will be module 1B in 2 days, then 2A and 2B, 3A and 3B, 4A and 4B. And when you have worked through all of those, actively worked through all of those, there will be a certificate for you waiting there. As Dr. Shireen already introduced, I'm Dr. Anne van Ewijk. Myself, I'm from the Netherlands, but I'm based in Dubai and I work for Abu Dhabi University. I'm Associate Professor of Management in the College of Business. Today, we're going to talk about visions, and there is a reason why there is an S behind there, and you will find out. Okay. Now, before I start telling you what we are going to do, I want to see if I can get some interaction going, and I want you to practice with the tool that we are going to use to stimulate that interaction. I know we have the meeting chats. I will look at the meeting chat and I will look at the Q&A after we're done with the session, but this is going to be our main means of communication. So everyone, don't put your mobile phones away. Grab your mobile phones. Go to your Safari, your Explorer, Google Chrome, whatever you use to surf the internet, and go to www.menti.com. Now, on the top of the screen, you can see a number there that is a code 4937049. This code, you will need it when you type it, and this question should pop up. Let's see if it works. Type your answers there. And let's see what your expectations are of this session. The Menti will combine and compile, and we will see if everything goes well, a word cloud. Now, this is technology. We're advancing. Oh, and there it comes. Now, we are expecting, of course, 263 of you to type your answers. So, ladies and gentlemen, fill this word cloud. What are you expecting from this series of workshops? What are your hopes? What are your expectations? What are your wishes for these workshops? And then let's see, I will share with you what we're going to do today. So I see already the word cloud forming, and you can see engagement, guidance, innovation, clarity, new horizons, enthusiasm, ideas, inspiration, and I can go on and on and on. And this is beautiful because as you see right now, these words, this word cloud is your collective mind speaking. And this is how we are going to proceed from now on until the end. We are letting our collective mind speak and sharing what we know and what we have in our heads. And I hope that we will be able to guide you through that. All right, look at that, beautiful. Okay, so as I said, this session is about visions of future schooling. What we're going to do is, well, we have our workout here. What we're going to do is not talk about trends. Like Mr. Kennedy already presented, there is a lot going on in education, and I don't have to tell you what is going on. We know about lifelong learning. We know about the importance of soft skills, about this report that came out. We know all the technological tools that are available to us to impart education, even at a distance or in blended forms, hybrid forms. We also are aware, all of us are aware of the trend that teachers have to become more facilitators of learning, that there is a trend ongoing because of these technological advancements of more lifelong learning, and education just does not stop after you have your degree. Also, what studies showed was that younger generations have shorter attention spans even. So there was a study by Microsoft showing that on average between two generations before and the generation that is currently in school, the attention span has diminished from 8 to 4 seconds if something is not interesting enough. Now, another interesting conclusion from that same research was that the millennials, the ones that we call came into bloom around the millennium, they have a shorter attention span, yes, but they are also more captivated by narratives and by visual work here. So when you have a strong narrative, when you are able to present with great visuals your story, your point, your lesson, then millennials actually have a longer attention span or the capacity to pay attention for a longer time than previous generations. Now, like I said when I started with this slide, we are not going to talk about trends. You know the trends. What we're going to talk about is something else. We are going to talk about scenarios, okay? So scenarios are carefully constructed stories. Scenarios are based on trends, but they take a few of these trends and they extrapolate into the future. Scenarios typically are not on a 5 to 10 year term. They are typically on a 20-year term at least. And these scenarios, they are based on known facts about how society is developing today, known facts about how technology is developing and what will likely be possible in the future, but also social trends, political trends, environmental trends, all the trends that we have just discussed and that we know about. They take them, they extrapolate them into the future and create a kind of extreme scenario. Now, this extreme scenario is definitely not a prediction of the future. So we should not read these scenarios as if they are predicting the future. Typically, when you look at scenarios of a certain sector, scenarios of a certain business line, you look at different scenarios at the same time. So you will not create one scenario, one most likely probable scenario, and then we will base our strategy on that. No, you create multiple scenarios that are very different in their extremes. Why? Because we don't know the future. We cannot predict the future. And if you look at research that has checked on how many predictions of the future in terms of economy or political developments have come true, that's very little. It's very little indeed. So these scenarios are not meant to be reliable, predictable representations of the future. These scenarios are extreme versions of what might come based on the trends that are here now. Okay. Now, when you use scenarios, You need to understand the implications of these scenarios and then think backwards. So if you know what the different ways the future can look like in 20 years from now, then you can look at yourself, at your own institutions, at your own profession, and see how you can adapt to that or prepare for that. As Mr. Kennedy said, a key word here is being ready. So we must find ways to be ready for something that we don't even know is going to come. But if you take these extreme scenarios in mind, you might be ready for something that you didn't even know that was going to come as an institution and as a professional. For example, this is an example, it comes from the OECD report. So this OECD report, which I believe we shared with you in terms of reading materials. So each of these modules has reading materials. You can read it before, you can read it during the week, you can read it after, but we do recommend that you read these because they provide you with more insights than we can possibly share with you in that hour, 1.5 hours that we have with you, as we want to make it very interactive. Now, that means that we present less and we let you talk more, right? So just so what happened in Singapore? If you may be aware of it, you may not be aware of it, but I like this as a case in terms of scenario thinking in education. What happened in Singapore was that already in the 1980s, so that is 40 years ago, the Singaporean government started developing foresight capabilities I say of course, but perhaps it's not of course. They started with the Ministry of Defense. Okay, they started with a scenario planning in the Ministry of Defense. And soon this foresight scenario planning as a tool for long-term policy thinking and development spread across the public service. Now, they developed the Center for Strategic Futures, CSF, you can Google it. It was established in 2009 to strengthen this long-term thinking and planning capabilities across the public service. So what they did was they identified black swan events. You might have heard of the theory of the white swans. Every fact that you see confirms what you already thought until there is a black swan. Now, identifying black swan events, developing contingency plans for what if that would happen, and free of the demands of day-to-day operational responsibilities. And this is what we are hoping to offer you in the courses that we have, in the workshops that we have for you this week and the upcoming 3 weeks, that we free you from your day-to-day operational activities, and we help you to take a step back or take a big leap into the future and reflect on your profession and reflect on your institution. Now, what the CFS did was inevitably to help the Ministry of Education in Singapore to launch a reform movement, right? This reform movement, they call it the Learn for Life reform movement, and it is based on 6 pillars. Now, these pillars came from the exercises that they did in terms of scenario planning and black swan events and etc. and forecasting, right? There are many different techniques. Today, we're only focusing on scenario, okay? Scenario building and backward strategy translation. Okay. Before we start, I want to know who is in our classroom, all right? So I want to do a poll again. I saw that many of you have been able with the mobile phone to find our interactive tool. Now let's try it again and let's see who is with you, because you can see me. I cannot see you. I know we are more than 200 in the classroom, but let's take a look around and see who is here. So stay on menti.com or go there again. If you clicked away, don't click away again, stay on menti.com and use that code to log in if you aren't logged in yet, and answer the question, who is in our classroom? Are you in school management? Are you a teacher? Are you a counselor? Or are you something else? I believe we are all something else as well, but only one answer is allowed, all right? Great. So what we can see now, and of course the total, ladies and gentlemen, should sum up to 260. So come on, I Really would love to see all of you there. So what we see now is that we have about 2/3 of the participants as teachers and 1/3 as school managers, and we have some counselors and people who are something else, but also involved in education. So that's great. Okay, interesting. Keep answering the question. If you can, I'll go to the next question for you, just to have a good feeling of who is here and who is this collective mind that we're going to build on. How many years of working experience in education do you have? Let's see all together, if we add it all up, how many years of expertise we can combine in our workshops. We have some people who are just starting, and that's great because we need the fresh insights. We have people who have been around for 3 to 6 years. So that means you know the routines, you know how to go, you're still full of that fresh energy, hopefully. We have 7 to 10 years, the big part, but also more than 20 years and everything between. This is great, ladies and gentlemen, because we can build on that expertise. We can build on the insights from the ones who are fresh. We can build on the insights from the ones who build on years of experience. So that's nice to know. And you can see also that it's a nice equal spread. It's not that we have only very highly experienced professionals. It's not that we have only the ones who are just starting. We have a very nice equal spread throughout our participants. That's great. Okay. Well, to continue then, and let me move my screen so I can see my slide better. All right, so scenario building for future education. What does that mean? How are we going to do this? Let me help you. First of all, I want you to close your eyes. So you will not be able to see the screen anymore. Please, everyone, just close your eyes. Really do it. Don't feel ridiculous. No one is grabbing you. Only myself is recorded. So you close your eyes and think about 20 years back. Where were you? Were you in primary school? Were you in secondary? Were you studying? Were you already working in education? For sure, we will have everyone. And then think of how education has changed from then, from your experiences that you had yourself, or when you just started as a professional until now. And of course, we have this big pandemic in the middle, which has created true disruption in the field. Another sign, another example or evidence of the fact that we cannot predict the future. But what scenarios can help us with is to look at these extreme versions of the future and see how we can build up resilience and adaptability to be able to handle whatever comes. So you wouldn't have expected that. No one saw the pandemic. Oh yes, there were some people who saw the pandemic coming, but there are other incidents that might occur. Cyber war, people are talking about another pandemic, other types of wars, economic disruption. Remember the recession that we had 10 years ago. Many, many different things, because we are now in such a globalized world, affect our society and affect how we learn and how we live and how we learn and how we offer and design education and how we do that as professionals. Now, what we're going to base ourselves on today, just to keep it doable in one workshops, is not to focus on all the tools that we can use. We're just going to use one type of scenarios, okay? In 2001, the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which comprises many different countries in our world, they started an initiative, so that's 20 years ago, Schooling for Tomorrow. And they wrote 6 different future scenarios. For those of you who are interested, it's not in the required reading list. Just go to their website or search for this in your Google, you will find the report. You can download a PDF even. And it's interesting to see what 20 years ago, how they envisioned today. Now, today, just last month in September, the OECD has presented 4 new scenarios. They are sketching possible futures for the year 2040. So this is a very timely event and very useful for us because we can grasp those 4 scenarios, apply it to use to reflect on our own situations, whether I thought we were only UAE, but apparently we are worldwide, on your own institutions, within your own national settings, and on your own profession. All right, the 4 scenarios are these. So we have one scenario which is called schooling extended. There's another scenario, it's called education outsourced. There is another scenario that talks about schools as learning hubs. And then the 4th scenario is learn as you go. Remember these 4, write down if you want. I'm very old-fashioned, I have a pen. Write down these abbreviations, remember them, because these are the scenarios that we're going to work with, and I'm going to dive deeper into each of them. So you see that when we talk about these scenarios, 2 of these scenarios keep a very strong role for the school as an institution, as a physical institution and digital institution of certification and offering of education. Schooling extended and schools as learning hubs. However, like I said, we must not go for the most likely or probable scenarios or scenarios that look most like we are working and operating right now. We must include extreme scenarios as well. And that's why we have included, or they have included, education outsourced and learn as you go, where you will see, while I'm talking about it, that the role of schools as institutions diminishes and dilutes among many other actors. All right, now we're going to back translate these to strategy, to institutional strategy. If you are in school management and you want to think more on a institutional scale and how can we adapt processes, procedures, and curriculums to the future, but also in a personal strategy in the terms of you are teachers, you are school principals, you are counselors. How can we adapt our own skills, our own knowledge to be able to face these 4 scenarios if they might occur, all right? Now, please remember again that these scenarios are not predictions of the futures. They are extrapolated trends in 4 extreme directions, okay? Now, here we go. So it's very important because this is one of the big hurdles when people do scenarios, building, future forecasting, is that we have people among us who are too realistic. And that's good. We need to be grounded. We need to be with our both foot on the floor. But what we also need right now is for you to let go and do not ignore the scenarios that in your eyes are either improbable or undesired, because we know the world is not perfect. So trends, as you can see, they can have positive effects, they can have negative effects. And all of these scenarios have their pluses and their minuses. So what we need to do is this, and now this is where our collective intelligence and our collective insights hopefully come to the fore. I'm going to describe each of these scenarios, while you then will reflect on your institution or your profession. So while you're reflecting on institutions, you say school, and then I'm going to ask you what new things would this scenario require from you in your position. And so if you are in school management, you're more likely to reflect perhaps on the institution. While you are in, for example, as a teacher, you're more likely to reflect in terms of pedagogy, curriculum, and also for everyone, personal development. All right. Whatever comes up in your head, you can share it with us and we will be able to see all the answers. I know we are 260, so we will not be able to dive into each and every one of your insights, but we are able to distill some. We will capture all of your input in an Excel, make a report about it and share that with you later. So already today, we're going to start creating and sharing collective insights that we will then be able to combine at the end of this 4-week journey. All right. First scenario, let's get started. I've talked enough. Again, everyone, don't put your phones away. I don't want you to be distracted, obviously, with WhatsApp and so forth, but go again to the Menti and let's talk about scenario number 1. So in the Menti, while I am describing, just feel free to share whatever comes up, okay? Whatever comes up. And let me just go to my notes so I don't forget anything for you. Some of you might have read, by the way, already these scenarios or the report of the OECD. That's great. That means that your mind has already been thinking and mulling it over. So I'm expecting great answers from you. For some of you, this is completely new. That's also great because you will see them with fresh eyes and we will get your first impressions, okay? Which might also be equally out of the box. Now, the first scenario, it's called schooling extended. What is it about? Well, schooling extended means that schools as institutions continue to exist. So participation in formal education continues to expand. However, what comes in, because we call it extended, is international collaboration and technological advances that will then support more individualized learning, less standardized, more individualized learning. However, all the structures and processes of schooling remain. Now, as schools are widely recognized as a foundation of economic competitiveness, so most countries in this scenario have intensified efforts to universalize access for everyone, whether you are poor, rich, whatever background you are from, universalize access to formal learning, and from the first years to life all the way through past tertiary higher education. Now, formal certificates in this scenario continue to be the main passports. You apply what is on your CV, your degrees, all right, this would be a requisite to economic and social success. At the same time, because this is schooling extended, everyone realizes that because of this universal access to formal schooling, these degrees are becoming more and more insufficient. So individuals start to accumulate alternative credentials by doing voluntary work, for example, or any other non-formal, non-paid working experience. Now, much attention inside schools focuses on curriculum, and there is still this pressure towards uniformity and enforcing standards. However, students will have more freedom of choice in choosing the content of the learning as long as the core competencies are achieved. Remember the soft skills that Mr. Kennedy talked about, things like cooperation or entrepreneurship. Now, there's also a very strong international public-private collaboration. Why? Because we now have digital learning systems, widespread, very advanced and mature digital learning systems. They are fed with learning resources and data that is shared across countries. Governmental educational authorities like ADIC, like the CAA, like other governmental educational authorities, remain the main locus of decision-making. However, because there are now much more international players at stake, international actors gain in power. So what we see as well is that inside the school, the traditional student-teacher relation and other processes remain, although there's innovation in there. For example, because of the technology, schedules are more flexible. We will see much more hybrid, much more live or distance learning. We see that, for example, feedback to students, but also feedback back to teachers and to parents is instantaneous. Why? Well, we can use so many kinds of technology, facial recognition technology, technology to evaluate student effort, aside from knowledge and skills. For example, student progress can be reported automatically, but also warnings of misbehavior can be issued automatically. So it's no longer necessary to just stop and test. Rather, assessment and instruction and practice take place at the same time, simultaneously, parallel. Now, schools can use their networks and economies of scale. So they leverage digitalization and data information systems. That also means that there are still teachers. These teachers, though, are very well trained, and they have very distinct responsibilities in terms of design of learning content and design of learning activities. Then the implementation thereof does not require all the time teachers. It might be done by educational robots alongside supportive staff. that work in various arrangements, could be voluntary or paid, part-time, full-time, face-to-face, online, all supported by this new software that we have. Digitalization also allows students to work more autonomously, supporting students' emotional needs, motivation in the classroom. This can also mean that when teachers, instructors are involved in implementing education, it is not so much the knowledge, because that is already rolled out, automated in an automated way. It is much more, they need to focus much more and pay more attention to learners' emotional needs and motivation for learning. The learning possibilities are there, how to get the children, the students, the high school and university students, adult students even, to be motivated to learn. This could also mean that that requires a mindset change among teachers. Instead of being experts in their fields, they will now become experts in emotional needs and motivation. Okay, this was scenario number 1. I hope while I'm talking, you have been able to launch many ideas about what it means for your institution, what it means for your profession, what it means perhaps even for yourself. This is, on the one hand, it's a very predictable scenario, right? We started with the most predictable one. However, if we think of it further and think about the implications, if there's such strong internationalization and curriculum content is universalized or standardized between countries and data is shared between countries, can students then enroll in public school systems of a country different than their own? Could there emerge some kind of international school system? Or should countries join efforts in developing common assessment and instruction tools? What would be the advantage of that? What would be the disadvantage of that? Right. Okay, so I'm going back to the presentation and sharing, and I love how all these different answers are popping up. I see enhanced learning community. We need a continuous improvement plan. We need to be very effective in the use of technology. And that's important. You can be very ineffective in the use of technology. It requires a change in thought, long hours of work. And I love how sincere and honest you are, because I even see a participant saying, I really don't know what that would mean for our school, for our institution, for myself, perhaps. Right. Let's go to the second scenario and see if you can reflect on that. This scenario is a bit different. This scenario is a bit different in the sense that education is now outsourced. You will see that traditional schooling systems break down as society becomes more directly involved in educating its citizens. And with society, we mean parents, we mean the community, and we mean private sector actors or non-profit actors that are not schools. They all become more involved in educating citizens, which means that learning now takes place not predominantly in schools as a physical or virtual location, but it's more diverse, it's more privatized, and there are more flexible arrangements. Again, with, of course, digital technology as a key driver, because in none of the scenarios, the expectation is that that technology will take a downturn. It will only become more evolved. Now, think of it, listen to me while I'm talking more about this scenario, or look at these pictures and see what that calls for you, what that would associates for you, and start writing as we did before. What new things would this scenario require from you? And how could you prepare for that, as this is a scenario that's not yet there, and it's quite radical. So, like we said, private and community-based initiatives emerge. Why? Because working arrangements can become highly flexible, which will allow parents to be more involved in their children's education. And public systems might struggle with the family's pressure towards privatization and customization based on the needs of their child. So choice is the key word in this scenario. There is an abundance of choice for parents and for students themselves in terms of where can you get your education. What we see then in this scenario is that great experimentation is starting to take place. experimenting with a mix of homeschooling, tutoring, online learning, community-based teaching and learning, in terms of groups of people that form together to impart their knowledge and skills and practice. In some countries, public and private providers, they will compete even in terms of quality of provision of education. In other countries, maybe it will be a public provision will be this baseline, this purely remedial solution for if other solutions by parents will, or by the community efforts are not there or cannot be facilitated, so that there's still a low-cost childcare education for children. Now, what you also see then in this scenario is that there will be much less governance and much less accountability. Because there are so many different providers of education, you see that there will be different certifiers, different indicators of quality that will be used. Why? Because the criteria for what is good education is also so diverse, not only the offering, who is offering it, but also the criteria of this education. Now, there might still be a government active in terms of wanting to have some baseline assessments, and the government might also be, this might be a disadvantage of this scenario, that concerns will start to grow about social fragmentation. As educational offering is so diverse, criteria for quality are so diverse, and students are following their individual learning paths, what is there to keep society together? You also see that employers will become more evolved as they can choose from different offerings of education. Even small and middle-sized companies might become involved, as they did not have the capacity before, but now they can create customized training programs with the help of the technology. We also might see in this scenario that there will not be these rigid structures in terms of horizontal segregation, year groupings, educational stages, but a more flexible structure in which learners are able to go through their own learning path, move at their own pace, and perhaps combine formal learning with other activities. Now, what may survive in this scenario are the cultural aspects of traditional schooling, such as teacher and student roles. Teachers are still teachers wherever they are, whether they are in a school, whether they are in a private sector institution, whether they are freelance tutors, or whether they are doing it voluntary in a community initiative. And students are the learners. And what you can also see there, then that will be imply a greater variety of teacher roles. Teachers can be independent carers that are teaching. Teachers can be career advisors. Teachers can be skills market analysts that help you to get the appropriate offering of education between all those different providers. Teachers can be pedagogy specialists in private platforms or elsewhere. All right, I'm going back to the slide and see what we have here. So I read that if we back translate this to what could be a strategy to evolve and to prepare our institutions and ourselves for this scenario, we see involving parents is key. Introducing real life experience in learning and making it part of formal learning or a mandatory addition to formal learning is important. Again, more technology, involvement of technology, maybe clubs, partnerships with community, different planning, right? I hope that in the course of these 4 weeks, these ideas, general ideas that are now sprouting out of your minds will become more and more concrete, and in the end lead to real initiatives that will imply real change to build up real resilience and to be ready for whatever the future brings us. Next slide. Scenario number 3. See that I go through these scenarios a little bit fast, by the way. This is also because our time is limited, but also because the purpose of this session is to get you thinking. We don't have to have all the answers. We don't need to have all the detailed steps that we are going to take to get ready for the future. That will come in week 4. You have 4 weeks to work on that. Now is the time just to break up free your minds from this operational day-to-day busyness that you are in, right? Scenario number 3, again, involves schools. However, when we first had schools extended, now we have schools as learning hubs. So schools remain, they're still there and they still play a pivotal role in the education. However, within schools, there's more diversity, there's more experimentation. Yeah. This means that schools are no longer a closed environment. They are completely transparent and opening up to communities and facilitating any type of learning, civic engagement, social innovation. So as you can see from the pictures here, it really builds schools become hubs in an extended learning community. So the learning does not only take place in schools, but schools play this pivotal role. Let me elaborate on that while you think about what am I saying and what would that require for your institution and how could you prepare for that as a professional. So again, we are on the Mentee. For those of you who might just be joining, you missed a whole lot, but come on and join us. Go to mentee.com and use this code to participate, all right? Let me describe the scenario for you for schools as a learning hub. So schools as a learning hub means that there's more experimentation, but the schools retain most of their function. So schools will be the ones offering activities to structure young people's time. And they are the ones who are contributing most to their cognitive, social, emotional development. At the same time, there are more sophisticated and diverse forms of competence recognition in the labor markets. Remember this report that Mr. Kennedy referred to about the future work skills. So there's this recognition of different competences that are valued, which mean that schools are liberated from the excessive pressure to offer credentials and to do assessments, but being able to offer more competence-based education. So in the end, what a student would have is not a note for math, it would be a note for problem solving, for example. So international awareness and exchange is very strong also in this scenario. However, the power does not shift to international players and large corporations. The power shifts to the local community. So although there is more internationalization, the power shifts to the local community because each community, each region will have their own requirements, their own goals, their own ideas of what is needed for youth in their region. So local actors come up with their own initiatives, focusing on the values that they consider important, which may be in common with other local actors or may be very specific. This also means that the way that education is then organized with the school as a local hub might be very different between one region and the other. It's so local, we're really talking about even municipal level or district level, that between one district in the same city and another district in the same city, education and learning might be offered in a different way. Now, what we see then is that we have these personalized learning paths that are then strengthened with a general framework that is shared by many of these local communities in terms of collaboration, in terms of self-evaluation, and peer accountability. So these type of mindsets and values are generally stimulated and facilitated by educational offerings everywhere. However, practices like grades, giving grades, and tracking progress have been completely abandoned. So school is the hub formed and formalized through local desires and local values. And there's no such thing as grading or tracking progress because they're personalized pathways to learning. This also means that a wide range of learning sources is recognized. Learning is ongoing, it's all-day activity. It's not like in the morning we go to school and our learning stops. The school is a hub. Learning takes place also outside of the school. It's a constant coming and going of different actors. So it's an all-day activity. May not have to take place in the classroom, physical classroom. So learning builds on teachable moments, as in practice, as in experiences. And teachers then have to act as engineers of these learning activities. How can teachers create these learning moments that will really bring their pupils to higher levels in their personalized pathways? Trust in teacher professionalism is very high in this scenario, and particularly teachers with strong pedagogical knowledge, able to switch styles, able to adjust to different learning styles and different learning needs from students, and close connections to multiple networks in the local community. Why? Because schools are now also open to participation of non-teaching professionals in teaching. So the teachers should be able to invite people from industry, to invite local actors in and co-design education for the pupils. That is scenario number 3. Now let's see what you've all been typing. Also, what's important then is just to think, this is just questions to think, what forms of collaborations would then emerge in these learning ecosystems? If you look at the local level, collaborations between schools and local actors, which local actors, how, but also there is still this internationalization. So how can schools be a hub, both from the international educational environment to the local educational environment? And might there be something as a multi-grade classroom, whereby you don't look anymore at the age that students have, but you put them together in terms of experience and motivation? Might look different still. So it is still schools, but looks in fundamental ways very different. Remember, no grading, no tracking. It's also, of course, very tricky in this scenario, how you can balance between instruction and exploration, because there's such an emphasis on learning by doing and by experiencing. All right, I'm going back to the presentation and see. So I'm reading no boundaries, yes. And what does that mean, right? Development of social skills, definitely. Focus on practical learning. And how can you design that then? And how can you incorporate it into the teaching that you are already offering now? Again, practical learning, high quality of educators. And in what particular skills should they be expert? And how should you measure quality in terms of educators? How about their local network? How about their capacity to facilitate these personal learning paths of students? How about their capacity to switch between different pedagogical styles? Okay, interesting. And remember, everyone, what I said at the start of the workshop. All of your answers, we're going to compile them into an Excel. We're going to see what you have in common, whether we can distill these collective insights from your collective answers, as we are 260 or maybe even more now in the session. And we will share that with you by the time you reach the end, the 4th week of our offering. Okay, let's go to the last scenario. And the last scenario is learn as you go. Now, learn as you go, again, is an extreme scenario in the sense that we don't have schools as main actors, maybe not even governments as main actors anymore. Learn as you go refers to a scenario where in 20 years from now, 2040, we have evolved in such a way that education takes place everywhere, anytime. There is no more a distinction between formal and informal learning, because the whole society has turned itself into a powerful machine of education. Think, for example, it's not in the scenario, but think about LinkedIn Learning for professionals, whereby now learning and knowledge, as Mr. Kennedy said, it's in the air, it's the air that we breathe, is widely available. We have the internet, we have LinkedIn Learning, which is a more regulated place where learning is shared. There are TED Talks, there are so many different forums and places where learning is offered that do not require a professional degree, that do not require your certificate or your diploma. Now, this trend extrapolated into the future becomes learn as you go. Again, I'm going to go to the question. You type in Menti, what does this learn as you go scenario, what would that imply for you? Would we be all without a job? What could we still offer? How could we contribute value how could we be of value in this scenario? Let me describe the scenario for you while you are thinking or typing. So it builds on these rapid advancements of artificial intelligence, right? And virtual and augmented reality, even allowing you to do role-playing, simulation games, and using the Internet of Things, programming. Now, learning opportunities are so widely available in this scenario, we are now 20 years into the future, that established curriculum structures and school systems become completely dismantled. So because of this digitalization, it has made it possible that we can access and also certify knowledge and skills and attitudes in a deep way, a meaningful way, and a practically instantaneous manner. It's all about programming the right algorithms to introduce into the formula the right input to assess, right? People's education advances now by leveraging this collective intelligence to solve real life problems. So it's not so much a curriculum topic after topic. Education focuses on real life problems, and any area, discipline, field is applied on that real life problem. And collective intelligence is used that way to solve these problems. So that's a good scenario. Now, lifelong, you might imagine in this scenario that we might all have lifelong artificial intelligence personal assistants. What are they doing for us? Well, they propose, based on what they know from us, what they see us doing and monitoring us over a period of time, they propose personalized learning solutions. They build on our curiosity and our needs. They help to identify our knowledge gaps and skills gaps. They encourage creativity and self-expression, and they can even connect us, these artificial intelligent personal assistants, they can even connect us to other learners who might have the same purpose as you at that time. There will be no language barriers in this scenario. Why? Because accurate translation is now automatic and in real time. I saw one of the questions in the meeting chat right before we were starting, whether this meeting would be translated into Arabic. In 20 years from now, that would be the case. You would see my lips moving and you would hear me speak in Arabic. Part of the old school system infrastructure may still be there, but it will be very open and flexible. There are no mandatory requirements of entry. There are no mandatory requirements of having spent at least X years in a school. It becomes more a place that is welcoming children to learn on a drop-in basis. Now, that also means that as school is no longer the hub or the place for children to be in a very structured setting, that there will be alternative childcare arrangements necessary because of the demise of the physical schools. So digitalization and smart infrastructure. So now we're thinking about things like intelligent playgrounds that measure what children are doing and then propose new activities, surveillance systems that are digitally connected to this interactive infrastructure can now look after children while proposing them with activities and fostering behaviors towards the satisfaction of goals such as having a healthy lifestyle. Now, it's very difficult in this scenario to assess the role of the government compared to the market or civil society. However, we might see a strong role for the government in terms of regulating the algorithms, ensuring that there's an algorithm transparency so that we are not learning a predetermined curriculum by someone, that there is really a customized offering and suggestions in terms of learning for everyone. Ethics by design, making sure that it's not only the algorithm that is programmed into it after, it's also the algorithm that is programmed into the offering. You have to think, for example, that And what we do when we surf on Facebook, when we go on Google, you all see these suggested reads. Suggested reads, or other people have also seen when you're shopping on Amazon. Now, these are based on algorithms. If the algorithm is wrong, or if they only show you things that are similar to what you have done already, that will not offer a comprehensive educational offering then, or suggestions for education that you actually might need. You might need to do something you've never done before. So it's very important how all these algorithms are programmed. Now, what happens with the teaching professional then? Teachers, professors, they vanished. They are gone. Why? Because learning opportunities are so available, so widely available and available everywhere. And individuals have become very smart consumers, professional consumers, with their, supported by their artificial intelligence personal assistant, that you don't need the teacher anymore. So what can happen though, you will find people who are like teachers, who are giving a class here, a lecture there, or offer various forms of tutoring, either offline or face-to-face. And these might take the form of people, and it might also be created by a machine. And that is the last and most extreme version of this scenario. And how can we then prepare for that, not in the sense of self-preservation, but in the sense of self-development? And how can we continue to add value as professionals in this scenario? What do we need to learn? What do we need to develop? I'll go back to the slide and see. I see a very nice concept. I love it. The just-in-time learning principle, or learning 24/7, or laboratory learning at school in terms of robotics, enables students. So if this scenario is coming, we do need to create students that are able to make the right choices. And that starts from an early age on. Yeah. Everyone in school should be educators and seize any learning experience. So at the same time, not only are we then educators, we are also learners. And we have to grow into what we really want to be in this future. All right, interesting. Great. All right, we have until 6:30. I'll take a bit more time just to see if there are any questions, although we will see each other again in 2 days. So let's recap the main insights, the things that I hope you will remember from what we talked about in terms of visions of future schools. Now, one way to develop strategies that do not build only on current trends and how schooling is evolving in the moment is scenario building. Scenario building is looking at possible futures with an S, possible visions with an S. So there must be multiple ones, because we cannot predict the future. And the only way to be ready for what comes is to take into account whatever might come. So scenarios are not a prediction of the future. They are possible futures. And they are trends taking into an extreme direction. So 99% sure none of these scenarios will take place exactly as described. But many developments that are described in one of the 4 scenarios might come about, and then you will be ready as a professional and as an institution. We also saw that there are multiple paths towards the future. We also saw that when we reflect on these scenarios, we can back translate that to our own strategy, not only institutional strategy, but also our personal strategy. And this workshop was too short for you to define that institutional strategy or define that personal strategy. Don't worry, don't be disappointed. That was not the purpose of this workshop. The purpose of this workshop was just to open your mind, start opening your mind towards these extreme versions of futures in education that can then maybe help you to have insights into your own development or institutional development. Now, again, we will capture all these ideas that you just shared, but they are very fresh. They are mostly first impressions, short insights and keywords. You will find that in week 4, there will be a session on sharing best practices. And there you will see much more detailed and actual best practices that might help you to build up resilience for the future. Now it was just opening up your mind. Things to keep in mind, though, when opening up your mind. I hope this will not keep you up tonight. There are challenges and tensions and paradoxes that we will not be able to solve. And they will continue to puzzle us from now until we are in 2040 and beyond. Now, it's always a question of what should we keep and update, and what should we radically change? Because there are many things, many aspects in our current educational system that are good, that are well thought out, and that have a purpose. And that have a purpose that we might not want to change. So what things can we disrupt to add value while maintaining what is already working well in updating it? Then also, once in 4 weeks from now, once your minds are into the future, you have a new vision, you have new goals, personal goals, institutional goals, we still have to work with the old structures. And I'm not only talking about the old structures around institutional structures. We still have the government with regulations. We still have the private actors. We still have the way we have been doing things before. It's not easy to change those processes and procedures that we are bound by. But I'm also talking about the structures inside ourselves. So we are who we are. We might have ideas to develop, but it's not going to be easy if it requires you to do something that you have never done before, or you have no practice with, or you are perhaps a bit scared of. So it's hard. You have to make sure that whatever you have as an institution, as a person, can be aligned with the new goals that you have. If you make goals that are in the end not attainable, you are in for disappointments, you are in for depression, and you might come to a complete stop in terms of development. Make goals that are challenging, but attainable, realistic. Okay, I'm going a bit slow here, but it's because these paradoxes, they're so difficult to deal with. Same with what we saw in these 4 scenarios. We saw in all of these scenarios that there is this tension between what is local and what the local community needs, and the international level in terms of internationalization, becoming more uniform, standardization. So how can you combine that in an optimal way? It will be a constant tension. Then, and this is particularly important, I teach entrepreneurship to our PG students, to our undergraduate students, we even go to incubators. Very important concept is the concept of failure, and how accepted is it to fail. Typically, I tell my students that failure is good as long as it's not too big, because it can destroy you. The ideal, what is a very common saying is that failure is good. We learn most from failure. Yes, but if the failure is so big that it destroys us, then what value did it have? Yeah. And in terms of education, in the sector of education, it gets this whole different meaning, because yes, we must innovate. Yes, we want to try new things. Remember the word experimentation, which was very important in some of the scenarios. However, you are experimenting with children's development. You are experimenting with students who might be impacted by your experiments that did not work out for the rest of their lives. So this is not an easy thing to do. A little bit of risk avoidance is very healthy in education. But how to balance that then with innovation, and how to find solutions in which you can innovate, and perhaps even on a large scale, without running unnecessary risks, because we are talking about people here. We're not talking about products. Okay, potential and reality. So this is related to the goals. and structures. Same thing. When you see what you want and what you could become, you are still bound by where you are right now. And you'll have to find a way out of that. Now, more typical going into technicalities of teaching would be then how much should we do virtual? How much should we do face-to-face, particularly in terms of soft skill building and versus knowledge development, right? Then also you, and I'm not going to go deeper into that one because you are all very familiar with that one. To what extent should we keep on teaching? And to what extent should we facilitate learning? The trend now is to focus much more on facilitating learning. However, aren't there core aspects, facts, techniques, and strategies that should be taught, that should be shown, presented, explained by people who have experience with that? Is that completely disappearing? Can we just leave it up to the students, or should we still have these experts in certain fields? Now, there are some more journals, academic journals, if you want to read about forecasting, about scenario building, about black swan identification. I included some links, but I think you can't click on it here because it's in the Menti. You can email me if you want the names of these journals, or you can't find them. But these are the names of the journals. So if you Google them and you type journal, it will definitely lead you to these forums. And here you will see, if you then search within the journal on education, it's very interesting because there's much more tools going on there. There's much more research on what education could look like. And also experimentation has been done and results have been published on those experiments in educational settings. So more insights on scenario building, futures, forecasting, go to Foresight, go to the Journal of Future Studies, go to Futures in Foresight Science, or any of these journals. All right, it's 6:31. We stayed within the time limits. Now, what I want to do now is look at the Q&A section, and let's see how many questions I can still answer in about 10 minutes, all right? So anyone who typed their question in the meeting chat, please go to the Q&A section and type your question there again, because this is where I'm going to go over, right? As the meeting chat is very busy because we are still 256 participants, okay? So I see that already 30 questions are answered, which I'm sure I have Dr. Shireen to thank for. Now, I have one question that says, are the 4 scenarios interrelated? So I'm going to answer that one. Yes, they are, because all of these scenarios are built on the same trends and knowledge that we have of the immediate future. Okay. However, how they are different is that they take these trends and they extrapolate them in different ways. So, for example, you can see that in 2 scenarios, schools still have an important role, while in 2 other scenarios, schools have definitely a subestimate role, a less important role in the whole of educational offering, much less than other actors. It becomes more of a level playing field. So they are related because they're based on the same trends in terms of technology, but they are also very different in their implementations. We have not been able to go into the details. Therefore, I refer you to the OECD report that I showed you. It's called Back to the Future, Scenario Building in the Education. You can just Google it and read the ebook. The link to the ebook is also included in the reading that you have received for this module. Okay, another question regarding the last scenario, the extreme one. Do you mean to say that there will be no such schools in present? And then what about the certification at all those levels of education? Will it go away? Yes, it will go away. So what this last scenario says is there will be no grading. There will be no tracking of process. Everyone can be their own teacher, like you say, and there's no need for any degree. You say it's cool and scary, and I would agree with you. It's cool and it's scary. And let's see if we can prepare for that. You can see already now some of these trends. There are some companies, I've heard particularly in the US, but they might be now in other countries too, where they will not hire you based on only your diploma. They will do a test to see how you work, and they will hire you based on your capabilities, whether you have a diploma or not. This is one of the evidences that they use to extrapolate towards this scenario. Right, I'm scrolling down. Do you not think that, I'm just reading the question, do you not think that teachers will be required to engage in debate and reasoning with children? The knowledge is common accessible, but critical thinking and debate needs to be with another, and ideally someone more skilled at reasoning or with greater experience or insight on the outcome of decision making might be better equipped for that. Completely agree with you. The thing is, these scenarios, so don't worry, like I said, they have undesirable aspects. When you dive into the details, you will see that all 4 of these have very undesirable and dangerous aspects, also in terms of privacy or cybercrime, for example. You will see, dive into the report. But this was exactly what I referred to when I said that we need to think very carefully to what extent do we go to a learning-oriented setting, or should we still focus on education as teaching? And aren't certain topics better taught and cannot be only discovered by oneself? So I completely agree with you on that one. All right, so another question by Gina. Thank you very much for that question. How do you think education without teachers would be? Will it be with robots only? In the scenario where we talk about robots implementing education, you see that there are still teachers, but they are not so much focused on implementing the teaching. They are focused on designing the offering. So design the content, design how it is offered, and then all of that is programmed and automatically imparted to the students by, for example, a robot who can also answer